Jinx with the co-creators and showrunners Christian Link and Alex Yee. Welcome. Welcome to the FYSEE event. It's nice to see you in real life, in the flesh, as opposed to hearing you through your character Jinx. I wonder if we could begin by talking about the adaptation process and taking something like League of Legends and turning it into a series. What are the primary things you learned as you were developing this, and what do you think would surprise people about the process of taking something like League of Legends and making a very specific narrative like this, as opposed to just open gameplay?
Good question. If you find the answer, let us know. I think it started with something pretty, I don't know, primal even. I think for us, as gamers, who've been with this IP and these characters for like over a decade, it's just, you just want to see these characters finally, on a bigger screen, because there are always these tiny figures in the game, and you see that for so long. So I think it started with, at the heart of it, I think it's just great stories, of course, that you want to find, but there's a certain, I think, like meta knowledge among players, that have been with these characters for so long, because they get attached to these characters, and I think that was kind of also our job, is representing not just finding the right structure and and the cool designs, but like what is the kind of the behavior actually of our players that actually should also somehow find its way into how these characters feel. So that was actually a pretty intense process, just finding these little nuggets how the characters behave. So I think that was probably the hardest part. I don't know.
And in terms of I guess some of the things that were learnings or sort of surprising discoveries. This is also part of animation, but I think it was embellished by the fact that this was animated about a video game. There are so many people who have to come together in their, the art that they do or the roles that they play to bring a character to life. And, it starts with Ella, and then you simultaneously have people, designing these concepts of these characters and finding their own interpretations of how to adapt them, I guess, from the game to the screen. And then you're handing it off to entire teams of animators who everyone has to come together to be playing this same person. There is what I think seems for a lot of people like a North Star in a lot of these characters that I think many people take as, oh yeah, that's who they are. You discover through this process pretty quickly how everyone is kind of looking at a character from a slightly different angle, and there's it's a really remarkable process when you sort of find a place where people are like, yeah, that seems like Jinx to me, and it takes a surprising amount of time and exploration. So I'm very glad that we finally did find our Jinx. That was the great hunt.
Ella, am I right that this is your first straight voice acting role?
Yes, and my first voiceover audition that I ever did.
Really?
I don't know how this happened.
Really stumbled in, and all of a sudden you're in an animated series. When your performance, when your physicality is removed from your performance, and you only have your voice to rely on, how does that change the way you bring life to a character and you bring idiosyncrasies to the character?
Well, I ended up being more physical because Jinx is so fun, right? She's so unpredictable, always has to be loose and childish in a way, and lots of energy. You should see me in the studio. I'm like bouncing off the walls, I'm jumping up and down, like doing all kinds of crazy stuff, because there is so much in the voice. And there's also she's got these two different sides of her, right? There's the powder, there's this really vulnerable side, and then there's the chaotic sort of crazy side. And you'll definitely see a difference in how I hold myself and talk with those two voices. Looking pretty weird.
Is there a camera on you? I know sometimes animators will look at footage of the actor performing and actually incorporate things from their faces. It's not necessarily like motion capture or anything, but just sort of I guess using you as a reference. And did that happen at all? Is that a part of the process of creating the show?
Yeah, especially since our animators were in France, often the lip sync and kind of specific expressions definitely were something that they wanted to look at, But to her point, you can get pretty animated in the booth. I remember there was one session where I think we just recorded something with you, some kind of fight scene or so, and I think our eyes were all on the page on the script, and suddenly you hear a loud thump, and then the camera all of a sudden is black and the sound is muffled, and we go, did you just knock over the microphone? Followed by a long silence, and then her going, no. So, it was gonna happen, but yeah, I mean, it's especially when you have a very international cast, and also the animators, folks that come from kind of every corner of the world, and so that was really helpful for them.
Can you talk to me about devising the look of the show? You said that was one of the things you had to figure out, and there's a very painterly look to Arcane. How did you settle on that, and when was the first time you saw what Jinx would look like? You guys.
It really started with this wonderful little studio called FYSEE that we had worked with on these music videos, and they're 2 or 3 minute videos, but they always had this really painterly cinematic look. They had this very special treatment about how they handled their camera. I think so much with camera work, you try to perfect things, and what they tried to do is just the very opposite, which is just have the most human feeling, even though it's animation. The imperfections, like the scratches on the lens, the little shakiness and that kind of stuff. And so that was always so important to them, and that's what made this just feel different. Even when we saw these little tests back then, there's one called La Gaviota. That was the piece that I just saw on YouTube or so 10, 11 years ago. And so that there was just something there. It felt more cinematic. It didn't just feel like animated characters. There's folks that really thought about the cinematography, So it started there, and from there on, I think we just did a bunch of tests playing with a model from Vi to even just get that tone right. Can you actually blend 2D and 3D in a way where it doesn't feel jarring in some way? And it took quite some time. It's hard to hire people because all the backgrounds they're all painted, and so hiring artists like that is actually not easy. Again, it's a very international team, which is why it's also so fun just to walk through the rows of the art department at FYSEE, but it was actually also pretty hard to hire for even because it was it's not typically how this is produced.
Yeah, I think there's in not handling everything in 3D, and sort of combining, I guess, some of the 3D and 2D elements. There's a sort of an artistic a drive, I guess, to every individual shot. So you're not necessarily seeing something as it would look, right? Which is what you get with the 3D. It's sort of yes, this is the shape, this is the angle, but rather you have an artist sort of interpreting the what's there in the scene, and then sort of putting in the background and the color in order to. I mean, I think they really try to make every frame a painting, and I think that's
Really
just one of the things that makes it so.
What you're seeing early on is the blocking of it, but not the texture of how they would look then?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it comes in with what he's talking about. The people who are painting a lot of the backgrounds, the matte paintings. They're really looking at shots individually, right? And then the teams that come in and do I guess the lighting and the compositing toward the end are also sort of they're looking at this frame that has been created and figuring out what little elements can I bring out of this to add just a little bit more life or a bit more atmosphere, and it's such a journey from the storyboards where you don't see really any of this, getting to the end, because there's just so many phases where the image and the viscerality of the picture just gets higher and higher, and it's a really magical process to watch.
So tell us when you laid eyes on Jinx for the first time in the form she would take in the show.
Yeah, in the form she had taken the show, because I saw, obviously, I looked her up, and a lot of the League of Legends characters and stuff. I think you had shown me in my first audition, a little tiny clip that FYSEE had done, or that you guys had done, of her kind of walking along the bridge, and then you see the braids, and there's this sort of panning shot upwards, which was cool. She was, she looks different, and that was interesting to see. That really helped me, just in the way she dresses and the tattoos and the hair and but with like the evil like purple glint in her eye, you know, to kind of really round out the character. But I wanted to wait. Like they sent screeners, and obviously like I saw the blocking. There are certain things that I had to match to the blocking of the movement. So I got to see it in various stages, but I wanted to wait and see it all together with the music and everything put together, and it was worth it. It's so incredibly beautiful.
You know, whenever you play a character in a game, you're playing. I mean, you bring yourself to that adventure. And I wondered if there's a part of yourself that you put into this performance, or anything internal that you can say that's my DNA in Jinx.
Yes, a lot of it. I mean, even just now, I was just saying, I really find it hard to sit still. And he was like, sounds like someone else I know. Like, yeah. I like to think the good parts of Jinx. Not like, you know, the murder and stuff. Sometimes, maybe. No. No, I mean, she's childish and energetic, and I definitely have a lot of those qualities. And but she's cooler than me. She's like funny, and I'm more clumsy. I can't do stuff like that. But she's very like intelligent. She's very fast, which is kind of a gift and a curse, I think.
Have you seen any of the cosplays of her?
Yes.
Yeah, there's quite a.
I want to do one so bad. I put it on my Instagram the other day, and a lot of people messaged me. I'm gonna try somehow get it together. Mm-hmm. I mean, people go in. It's crazy. It's so cool, and not just at like the conventions, but like I don't know if you guys saw. There was like a group of friends who did a whole photo shoot, and they all dressed up as all of the main characters. There was like 10 of them, and they looked so good. It's crazy. It's really cool.
I find that really interesting. It's just that the whole cosplay phenomenon is, you know, it goes, of course, into many different franchises and stories, but people feel such a connection to a character that they just want to live as that character, and that's a part of gaming too. And I wondered if you guys had any thoughts about that and how that factors in when you are in control of the story, when you're telling the story, as opposed to the person playing who's directing it themselves.
I mean, you know, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but there's definitely something about an authentic feeling of what it feels like to be Vi or Jinx, you know, in the game. I mean, if you play Vi in League of Legends, you know that if there's a fight, you go in first, you know, and you probably don't make it out alive. And so you don't know that when you just look up a page about the character. You just kind of have to play her to know that based on her, like, gameplay kit, on her abilities and that kind of stuff. And so it's definitely something that I think we want to respect, because, you know, this is how this feels also authentic to our audience. And so I think it's incredibly important, you know, because it's just who they are, you know. And I think if we don't respect that and we don't spend the time with, you know, figuring that out, then you know, they're going to notice.
Can you talk to me about the music in this series? I think it got the soundtrack got was a Billboard Music Awards finalist for top soundtrack, and I wonder, we can applaud that, sure. You've got Sting, you've got Imagine Dragons, but how did you come up with the sound, the aural landscape of Arcane?
Well, because we have this dichotomy in, you know, Piltover and Zaun, we definitely wanted to also find a different sound there. You know, Piltover is a place that's more orderly, it is more refined, it is more like, you know, clockwork, perfected clockwork. And so we said from the beginning that should sound very orchestral. It should sound like, you know, very kind of refined clockwork written orchestra. We even kind of reshuffled how the orchestra was seated just to actually have the right kind of sections in the right place so you can hear them better, because we wanted to have this written music that really feels like it's a machine. You know, whereas Zaun, this under city, it's much more based on, you know, chemicals and engines and steam driving things there, and so everything feels more repurposed. You know, there's fewer instruments, there's fewer bodies, and so that was kind of the concept of it. And so from there on, you know, whenever we had a moment per episode that we wanted the music to really elevate, that moment, we just tried to find the right artists and collaborated on all these different songs.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
He's really the I guess the driver for music. I mean, of course, we have you know, the Alex Temple and Sebastian Deschamps on our team who, you know, I think one of the things that they did really early on that helped us quite a bit with you know, working on story and sort of developing these characters was we had pretty much from the outset of the writers' room these sort of individual themes for all of the different characters, and those themes had, basically they were like 2 or 3 minutes, and they had their own sort of journey, right? Sort of tracking the arc of the character, and it's really stunning how when someone manages to capture that essence in music, right, and with the right instruments, how it I don't know, it infuses you, I guess, as you're sort of working. It was, I think many of the writers would, it's like what you listen to in your headphones, right, as you're staring at a blank page, wondering why you ever committed to this profession. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, watching all the music come together for Arcane was just, it was really mind blowing. And I think so many of the people who became involved were people where you're like, wait, who? Yeah, I don't know. It's a hell of a ride.
Were there any visual artists, painters, sculptors, any classical artists that you drew inspiration from? Because there is such a painterly look to the series. I wondered if you did a lot of browsing of museums and found things that you liked, or artists that you not necessarily would copy, but just sort of store away for inspiration.
Well, I mean, I guess, if you asked our French artists that, they would certainly have opinions. Yeah, I mean, that's really their craft, and I think especially for some of the skies, there were definitely a lot of Turner references that we often had. It was like this British painter, a little plucky, and I think other than that, definitely the technology in Piltover and kind of how things are working. It's kind of like a lot of these prototype drawings that you could find, from Da Vinci. Definitely were always big inspiration for what happens in Piltover, because it is science, but it's also art. We never wanted things in Piltover and Hextech, we never wanted it to feel like it's just numbers, and geometric shapes. There was always supposed to be also a touch of art in it, that even, the smartest individual could not quite make it work because there's something just ethereal about it. And so I think, obviously Da Vinci is a big name, when you think about that. So that definitely was an influence.
Well, we talked about the cosplay and the connection that fans have to the characters. What have you had any interactions with the fans of League of Legends who've dove into the world of Arcane, and what are some of your memorable encounters with people who also love sharing this world?
Me? There have been more for this project than anything else I've done. It really, there's like a whole incredible community that, huge gaming community that I wasn't previously a part of. Still not really, just like an honorary member of the community. But everyone's great. There's so much knowledge and so much lore and just so much years of history, and there's just so much around the game. I'm not gonna, I haven't played, I'm not a gamer, I'm not gonna pretend, that I am, or that I belong in it, so to speak. But everyone has been incredibly welcoming and kind, and I think that's a testament to the writing. You guys have done such a great job marrying the two things. But it's been really great to just interact with people, especially like Instagram. As much as we hate social media, it's great for that. I love seeing people's fan art, and just like, I think people really connect to a character, and then they hold on to you. They're very loyal and dedicated and kind and welcoming, and it's been really cool to interact with people.
Alex and Christian, do you get a lot of feedback or notes from the fans?
In terms of feedback, we don't, there's certainly, you will hear on the forums, I guess, generally people's opinions of everything. And, honestly, like, I've worked for Riot for a very long time. The community is very vocal about what they like and dislike, and it was, the positive response that we were seeing for Arcane was without, at least with such a small negative response was really astonishing. Honestly, I was sort of gearing up for so many things, and I'm like, I don't know if we nailed this, and I don't know. I guess I really felt like, a sense of pride that it was such a thing that we gave to them, after such a long time, that, people really, I think, just sort of rallied to support it. In terms of directly, though, you don't, it's surprising how much you don't run into League fans in person, unless you're at somewhere, like a convention. Yeah, I think in the United States, it's one of these things where if you don't run into it a lot, but then when you do meet someone who plays League, it's like already you've kind of you're in the same little secret club.
Well, there is a community, but it's online. It's
Right,
another
right,
dimension,
yeah.
and it's not something that happens where they're often. I mean, there are gatherings and things like that in real life, but
I did have a really funny experience just recently. I was playing an online game that mostly my wife plays it, and I hopped in, and we've been in this guild for a little while. It's very social, and at one point, one of the women in the guild is like, "I'm gonna go watch Arcane with my husband," and she's like, "Oh God, I have to take care of the kid. I don't know." But and he wants to watch. Will someone watch it with him? And I'm like, yeah, I'll watch it with him. And she's like, I think you'd rather watch it with someone who might understand. I was like, you're probably right about that. And eventually I told her that I did work on it. That was a fun conversation too.
Undercover. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. The team from Arcane, Alex Brunel, Christian Lake, and Alex Yee. Thank you very much for being with us.